All right, welcome back to the e-commerce logistic Asia Summit. So let me introduce you to our next speaker. We have Samuel Chan, who's a regional SVP of cross-border operation at Lazada. Samuel has more than 25 years of operating experience in supply chain and logistic management, taking on both operations and business development roles in 3PL companies such as DHL and Schenker, but also with brand companies such as Nike. He has joined Lazada regional office as a lead of Lazada with cost-effective solutions. So we're going to hear from Samuel. The session title is called E-commerce Logistic Outsourcing, How and Who to. So let's hear from Samuel first, and then he will be with us for the live Q&A.
Thank you, Max, for your introduction. It's a pleasure to be here today. Just a note to my audience, this is a pre-recorded session. You can ask any question after the presentation. I'll be online after this. Now, let me get to what I'd like to share today. That's the topic on e-commerce logistics outsourcing. Depends on who you are. You may see this from an angle as the e-commerce logistic lead of your company, or your own setup where you have already conquered the local market. And right now you are considering selling to outside of the country. What I'm going to share will have common grounds regardless of which perspective you are looking for. Now, this slide simply reinforces what we already know, that e-commerce is a reality. It is here to stay and will grow further. The projection is still strong, looking to grow 15% CAGR to 443 million users by 2025, with average revenue per user hitting close to US $400. The projected penetration is estimated to hit 63% by 2025 in Southeast Asia. These are all great statistics for business owner, a buoyant market with still lots of potential to tap into. However, the recent global developments, such as the war in Ukraine, the hotspots in Taiwan, the natural calamities around the world, have definitely put a dent in our confidence. We see supply chain continues to be under stress, facing numerous fronts of uncertainties. Nonetheless, the world in the past had many fair shares of different challenges, and yet it pulled through. Perhaps I'm more optimistic. So I do possess a quiet confidence we will continue to see the growth of e-commerce market, but perhaps not as exponential as in the last 5 years. Let me get into the gist of our session today with a business case study. It will help us to see the logistical challenge faced by any company who wish to tap into the foreign markets. This is about a sport apparel company and well loved by the user. Today, they operate their regional DC out from Hong Kong. They have been growing very aggressively over the last 5 years. Like many other big sport apparel brands, they have their own omni-channel strategy and are in the midst of establishing the execution plan, specifically in addressing the logistic aspect of the model. They have set their eyes on the massive 700 million population Southeast Asia market. Today, they operate through retail doors and their own online store. So what's the challenge they face when exporting direct from Hong Kong to each of these markets? They have been processing their internet orders and deliver to buyers using express courier. This certainly delight the buyers, but at a very high cost. Unlike order delivery through a local site, their lead time is longer, considering the warehouse lead time and line haul to the final destination. And during the pandemic period, where freight availability and costs were inconsistent, they do face numerous challenges. They consider bring the products in bulk, import as B2B. However, they face the issue on importation regulation. In some of these markets, they do not have their own business entity. Even though each destination country has a de minimis provision, and because of their high product value, each import will be subjected to duty and tax. So this gives rise to the question of who bear the taxes. And when the product reaches the destination country, there will be cases of returns. and many apparel retailers offer no question asked policy on returns. So once again, you have cost issue to address. And if all these logistic questions are left unanswered, surely the customer purchasing experience will be dented, and that directly affect the sales conversion of the e-commerce strategy. Broadly, we can divide the cross-border logistic chain into three components. First, the cross-border line haul. This is the international transport leg of the chain, and this can be done through different modes of transport, including air, sea, and land. The choice of each mode really depends on cost and lead time. So if your demand is to have delivery within 7 days from Hong Kong to Malaysia, so your only choice is air freight. But on the other hand, if your replenishment lead time allowed 30 days, then you can choose sea freight. There are other unforeseen circumstances that your decision may defy the convention. During the pandemic period, sea freight capacity was overstretched and the price went up many times. So as a result, some companies actually use air freight instead. Second, the cross-border fulfillment logistics. This is the warehouse operation leg of the chain. The decision to set up a country e-commerce fulfillment center will depend on the overall cost to serve and the lead time as an enabler to grab more market share. Generally, the cost per parcel is lower than sending the same parcel directly from another country using air mode. There are, however, the downside of setting up fulfillment center, one being inventory holding in multiple countries and higher degrees of inventory redundancy. However, the plus will be lead time response and the advantage of having inventory all the time. This matters to consumer experiences. And as for last mile delivery, this is the destination final delivery leg of the chain. It comes after the order is picked and packed by the fulfillment center. Typically, all the parcels from the FC would be delivered to the sort center. From there, each parcel will be grouped into zone or cluster for delivery to the end consumer. One thing to bear in mind, the last person with face time with the buyer is the last mile delivery company. I heard one of the most challenging statements made by a white goods company, that no matter how great their product is, but what the buyer remembers is the experience when he or she received the product, and that determines the feedback on their website. And among all this setup, never forget about the API of ERP and OMS with your third-party logistic company. I can't emphasize enough the importance to have this done. In the world of e-commerce, where orders volume, especially during campaign, runs into hundreds of thousands all within a day, you can't afford to rely on conventional worksheet and manual transmission of orders. That would totally ruin the efficiencies of your logistics setup and will increase unnecessary costs. Let's take a look at the two different models that company can adopt to deliver cross-border orders from your country. First is the dropship model. This is by far the most straightforward model with lesser operation setup to achieve cross-border order fulfillment. This diagram here shows the typical routing ex-China to Southeast Asia countries. Marketplace platforms like Lazada and Shopee derive bulk of our sellers from the Chinese source. We have multiples of thousands of Chinese sellers doing cross-border business through the marketplace platform. In short, the dropship model will see order being processed within your own country warehouse. Once ready, it is picked up by your air freight forwarder. They will process all the export procedure requirements, load the parcel on flight, clear the destination custom, and put it onto the last mile delivery to complete the order. The duty and tax will be subject to sale price of the parcel and subject to de minimis provision of the country. The next model is the fulfillment setup. This model will require inventories to be positioned at each destination country, and hence a fulfillment center will be the centerpiece of this model. Sellers will need to size up their business volume for each market and decide on the level of inventories and SKU ranges to park there, logistically different from the dropship model. The inventories will be sent in bulk to each FC and will do so via sea freight so as to enjoy a lower CPU. Duty payment will be assessed based on HS code of each SKU. The inventory will be put away in the FC, awaiting for future order drop. Once order comes in, the FC will perform the pick pack operation and load up for the last mile delivery. Now that you're familiar with the models, the next question to ask is the why. The most obvious one is you're entering a new market. There are many companies that are considering this aggressively to expand their market presence. So I think the focus for any company to first enter the market got to be creating market awareness and market share, while allowing other logistic providers who already possess the know-how to do it on your behalf. By the way, outsourcing does not have to be forever. I know of companies who made a switch to self-operation once they are able to stabilize their business. Second will be expertise. You will start to encounter many different requirements imposed by the destination country regulators, and it's unlikely you will be familiar with them, let alone addressing them on your own. In addition, you will unlikely have in lots of network to assess the accuracy and the proper ways of how it's being done. And hence, getting someone who are familiar with the regulation, the processes is going to benefit you. Third will be the need for facilities. This is specifically for company who opt to set up fulfillment center at destination. It will not be practical to build your own facility, recruit and train your own logistic team to operate the site. Henceforth, outsourcing this portion will be most logical. In addition, most of the Southeast Asia countries present itself with numerous providers of different scale and quality to choose from. Fourth will be speed to market. It's about the decision to set up everything on your own as versus using existing provider in the market. Certainly, the later option will far surpass the former in terms of lead time to get ready, especially in the e-commerce space, where speed is everything. You can't afford to spend months, if not years, in setting up your own self-operated logistic network. Lastly, it's all about where you place your investment. Given the bucket of resources available, the priority to enter new market will be to invest in securing market awareness and market share. Once you've decided with outsourcing, you will need to identify what's the scope of your project. I have grouped the numerous segments of the chain into two broader groupings. The one on the left is a cluster of origin to destination activities, covering consolidation, line haul, and the customs brokerage. You can certainly choose by piecemeal, which means you will be the one to string them and coordinate activities. Or you can choose to make use of a shipping partner who can manage all this on your behalf. They will already have an existing partner and own setup to support the entire logistic chain here. On the right side, the cluster of activities at the destination. Here you see the FC and the last mile. They can be outsourced separately, or you can opt to use both services from the same 3PL. More and more, we see 3PL combining both as one offering to the market. I will also call out a separate breed of provider. They are not the operating company, but rather technology companies who aggregate the rates and service level of numerous 3PL into their platform. And in turn, you can sign up to their services and get to choose from their portfolio of 3PLs. The advantage for you will be the efficiency of getting numerous offers in one platform as versus getting quotation from each one of them. Now let's look at the criteria in selecting a logistic partner. So I break down into three categories: the shipping partner, fulfillment center 3PL, and last mile delivery. Let's start with the shipping partner. You will want to look for one who have good network, who will be able to move the good efficiently, and they'll be able to reach the buyer wherever they are. And certainly they should be able to carry out negotiation and transaction on your behalf. At the operation front, they should have physical office in destination country, experience as well, and facilitate preferred payment methods such as cash on delivery. And definitely they must be able to provide tracking information on your behalf. Onto the fulfillment center, it'll be great to be able to work with someone who have existing customer like your same industry. They will be familiar with the nuances of the market and be able to anticipate better. They got to have enough capacity, especially during the campaign season. They should be operating on an efficient WMS and be able to link to ERP through API. And preferably, they do have ability to pull data analytics and provide insight to your business so to help you to make critical decisions. Do not solely focus on price point. Service and quality matters a lot here. And lastly, the last mile delivery. Take note that the last mile CPU remain to be the highest in the entire e-commerce logistic chain. So you will want to have comparison and select the one that offer you the most competitive pricing. And look out for capabilities to deliver to outlying addresses, especially in large countries like Indonesia. And certainly tracking ability is a given. Before you formally engage your 3PL, understand that their success will determine your success. It would be very careless to leave your 3PL alone to do their thing once you outsource the logistic activity to them. It will come back as an issue to bite you. So let's understand how we can avoid that situation. First off, make sure you establish a contractual relationship with them. Either company, yourself or them, can propose a draft agreement for review. Important consideration is the tenure of the contract, the terms such as liability and termination, service level, and of course the rates. Define a KPI and review them regularly. And this is an important area to be included in the contract. It will allow both parties to make meaningful discussion, assessment of performance and obligation. And in some cases, there are even penalty and reward clauses included to drive better performance. If your business volume is significant, ask for a key account manager. That will save you lots of hassle to deal with numerous parties at the 3PL site. However, if this is not available, make sure you create a clear line of communication between parties to resolve issues, to highlight problems. Last but not least, and this is the one that is far least practiced by most companies, share your business growth plan. It is important. The more your 3PL understand your business, the better they are able to prepare ahead for you. And especially during campaign, especially during growth stage. If they know you're ambitious, what's your projection going to be like? It is better that their likelihood they will prepare ahead of time capacity on your behalf to support your needs. So this is the type of understanding that you want to create to build a long-term, a long-lasting relationship. All right, now they've decided to outsource, what will be the practical next step? Get your requirements clearly listed down, such as your volume projection for at least 12 months, your SKU ranges and profile. Have a budget set in mind and service level that has to be very specific. And make sure your own system are ready to perform API and prepared extensive information such as source and destination profile and any special services you may require. And have them written in the request for quotation document. Stand out to at least minimum 3 partners, cover all the logistics segment, and provide all the necessary granular data if you can. And if you are selecting fulfillment center, make sure you visit the site. When you receive all this RFQ, it's time to do a comparison. So you should compare things like your cost per unit or cost per parcel, compare your service lead time, check out the damage and the liability coverage. It's important because you are liable to your customer as well. And the payment term, is it going to be 30 days, 45 days, and all these are negotiable. And last but not least, look out for special or unique conditions such as MOQ, upfront payment, etc. So all this will help you to make a better decision. So once you're done through that, then it is time for your appointment. Well, I hope that this short segment of introduction of how you will outsource for your e-commerce logistics requirement has been beneficial and useful for you. So I'll be around to take your questions. So stay around and I'll see you shortly. Thank you.
All right, thank you very much, Samuel, for this presentation. That was interesting. So I want to remind everybody that you guys can ask questions using the Q&A tab located on the right side of your screen. So go ahead, if you have any question for Samuel, you can ask your question now and we'll take them. You can also click on the raise hand button located at the bottom of the screen, and this way you can switch on your webcam or just your microphone and ask your question directly. I wanted to ask you, going back on your presentation, Samuel, I wanted to understand whether there are any kind of restrictions for brands, for merchants, when they get into cross-border in Southeast Asia. Do you have, in the case of Lazada, do you need to be of a certain size or be in a certain product category, or maybe have some kind of certificate for some products in those countries? How does that work? What kind of restrictions do you put in place here?
Um, well, the restriction really comes from the government side, both from the source as well as the destination. So if I give an example like Thailand, if you want to bring your product from another country into Thailand, you really got to understand the expectation of licensing, registration of the product, even to some aspect, quality assessment of your product that is worthy for consumer usage before you actually can sell it inside the countries. So for each country, there are myriads of different requirements, and I guess they're about if the seller wish to use a Lazada logistics services, and we will be of assistance to be able to outline some of these requirements for them, the do and don'ts, the possible and the impossible. So yes, there are all this regulation in the Southeast Asia.
This is a brand new before you into cross-border commerce, you need to have a proper documentation to be able to sell that product into a market like Thailand.
That is correct, Max. So, but by and large, a lot of our sellers are selling products that are not at that level of requirements. But if you start to touch on things that is electronic in basis, or there's some chemical compounds, then sellers should be more mindful. They should themselves actually quite aware that their product do subject to government regulation, even in their own domestic country actually. So it's not something that is out of the world that seller are so completely ignorant. It's just that each country practice quite different in terms of the various of standards.
Seller was not operating in a market like Thailand, was completely maybe in the US or Europe. I never put a fit in Thailand with his product. I mean, it must be quite complicated to go through, all the documentation and all the bureaucracy of those agencies to get the right approval. Does Lazada actually assist them to do this as well?
What you said is correct. In fact, if you are a seller from a foreign countries and you don't have a local rep in Thailand itself, it is really difficult. So from a Lazada perspective, we do not undertake that kind of services as registration. Uh, Fundamentally, there must be a local representation to own those licensing to sell it inside the country of residence. But from a Lazada perspective, sometimes we do help to make reference of potential partners that could engage directly between seller and themselves. We will be arm's length in this perspective. We will only want to manage the logistic aspect of it. When it comes to regulation and licensing, it is on the owners of the seller.
Okay, I understand. So very similar to those trading partners, the TPs in China, you will have to find someone, a company who does something similar, some kind of an agency who can help you to do this kind of thing, right, in those countries.
Indeed. But not all countries are so strictly regulated. There are many other Southeast Asia countries have a much more relaxed rulings regarding products. So seller could maybe adopt a pick and choose kind of approach if they are entering foreign market for the first time. Don't choose one that is filled with barriers. And we know why the country did it that way. It's very much a nationalistic protection measure. Some of these measures are erected for.
What are the easiest country in Asia to actually do cross-border right now?
Well, in our experience, country like Malaysia, Philippines remains to be very open for business.
Okay.
Country like Thailand, Indonesia, they are lesser in terms of flexibility for coming into their country of for trading. It's still very
Okay.
much a domestic protected economies right now.
Okay. Another question I had for you is, 'cause we've talked about this earlier during our sessions. Uh, does your e-commerce logistics solution provided by Lazada actually support the other platform, or you are only, feeding to the Lazada platform? I mean, if someone, for example, has some
Mm,
other social, I will not even name the competitors, but
sure.
maybe they do some social selling on Facebook, on Instagram.
Mm.
Do you also support them in that case?
We are moving to that direction. Not all the 6 countries we are practicing these services, but they are ready
Okay.
to. Well, at least one country that has started off, and it will be rolled out across the Southeast Asia progressively. Um, by doing so, we are facilitating ease of business for our seller, that they won't
Yeah.
have to worry about trying to divide their inventories if they are selling over multiple platform. We certainly understand that being a challenge for some of our sellers.
Okay. So that's something you're looking to do down the road. Okay. That's
Mhm.
great. Let's take some questions. Some of the questions are popping up already. So let's start maybe with this one from Stephen.
Okay.
So he's asking, when exploring partners to outsource with, what trends in accurate system tracking capability are you witnessing for inbound to the fulfillment center or outbound? Are e-commerce player looking for more than location tracking? Okay, a pretty technical question for you from Stephen that you probably know in Singapore.
Thanks, Stephen, for the question. I think we definitely can't do away with tracking. Um, that has been like the genesis of a lot of these e-commerce logistic platform or solution. Tracking being the default mode of a must-have. I guess the question very much is how, to what granular details you want to track to, right? So the question talks about the trend in tracking accurate system tracking capabilities. Our weakness is the inbound to fulfillment center to outbound. So maybe I'll touch on the inbound side first. Well, from the inbound side, from a source, typically from a foreign country to a destination country, you will appreciate that the touch point is much more longer and more multiple player, as well as involve government entities like the custom point. So what we see in terms of the inbound side of the tracking has a little bit of a mixture in terms of the accuracy, and especially when it comes to uh, the side of custom, for example. It is not as easy as trying to get the customer give you the information. Depends on the country. In Singapore, I think it is easy, but not necessarily elsewhere. So you depends on manual intervention to provide the same kind of tracking information. And then here lies the accuracy question, right? So it really depends on the person who is providing this particular touch point. So there's one good example that inbound accuracy, what I'm looking at, is still not down to that minute accurate data that one might want it to be. From the outbound perspective, I would say that's fairly better control because it's really very much within the network. In the Lazada context, right, we have both Lazada warehouse and Lazada last mile. It's all in-house. So from the order point drop to our warehouse all the way to the final last mile to the door of our customer, the buyers, it is all within the control of Lazada. Then I would say there is a very high degree of accuracy and reliability on that track and trace information. I hope that answers your question, Stephen.
Yeah, thank you, Stephen, for the question. All right, let's move on to another one. Maybe I'll bring this one from David. What is the most critical point for outsourcing e-commerce logistics?
Yeah, very good question. I guess maybe the ease will be difficult to answer. I really don't see there is one point that is critical, and really depends on who you are as a business entity. If you're a small merchant seller, you will have a different consideration. But if you're a big MNC, then your consideration is so different. So maybe I just touch on these two categories as a high overview. I think for a small merchant seller, right, logistic is to them a necessary evil. It is something that has to be done in order to sell the goods across country. Uh, they want it fast, they want it cheap. In fact, free if possible, right? So they don't really necessarily see it as a strategic tool, but it's a necessary evil. So the focus is very much driving on very tactical requirement like cost and speed. But then when you're a brand, say a big US sport apparel brand, that is completely different. You have much more consideration, right? Taxation, business entity, customer experiences. You're plugged into the omni-channel strategy because you definitely have a brick and mortar shop that you need to contend with in terms of balancing your inventory and lead time. So I think that part is much more complex. So really, at the end of the day, when you start talking about outsourcing of e-commerce logistic from a brand perspective, right, it will be to me a one particular nuts and bolts into a big scheme of strategy plan. So it is important, but probably it's just one note besides the many other aspect of consideration that the brand must take into account. So
Okay.
thanks, David, for this question.
Thank you, Dave. Yeah, and the extension from outsourcing, what have you seen major pitfall when outsourcing?
Okay. By the way, Max, you're coming in a little bit weak. Just to let you know,
Okay,
I get to see the question on the
thank
screen.
you.
Mark, thanks for your question. What have you seen as a major pitfall when outsourcing? Hmm. All right. One of the pitfall that I do recognize in an outsourcing, especially maybe in the e-commerce space, right, is the planning window. I think it's peculiar for e-commerce ecosystem where speed, the demand, the response tends to be high, and the time to respond is very short. But yet you are supposed to do this outsourcing exercise in the best possible way. But given the time that you need to respond, the quality of the assessment sometimes will be compromised. I came from a background in my previous life in the 3PL, the B2B side. You are called 3 month minimum to 6 months to do an outsourcing project. You do have time to plan, to critically assess all your requirement, to look at the evaluation, to take time to talk to your potential 3PL. But in the e-commerce world, I can tell you something. I set up warehouse in 1 month's time. With 1 month, you have very little of those planning window, much less evaluation window. So at the end of the day, the pitfall is about recognizing that the outsourcing exercise will fill with certain flaws that we are prepared to address it thereafter because the market entrance is more critical than the evaluation exercise that we think and we need to manage and mitigate. So to me, the pitfall is really about the time. It's just one of them. There are many others, but I felt this could be relevant since I'm talking about e-commerce outsourcing logistics.
Okay, right. We have another question that I want to bring up from Tegu in Jakarta. So it say, apart from the cost, the challenge when we're using a 3PL to handle VFC must be full carton, maybe? I don't know. I'm not sure. Maybe it is.
Fulfillment center.
Or fulfillment center is when we have such a campaign that will eat up the storage, which will go to the overflow storage. Can you share if you have any best practice from your experience?
Apart from the cost, the challenge when we are using 3PL handle fulfillment centers when we have such a campaign. Yeah, that's definitely. I think Lazada, we we constantly face that challenge, right? From a business as usual where we have no campaign to 99, which is tomorrow. As a reminder to the audience, there's a 99 tomorrow, and shortly we have our big campaign 11/11. Essentially, the fulfillment center that we set up, right, are never enough, and that's a good problem, but it is also a problem that's not easily resolved. So at the back of what we're going to plan for to meet with the campaign requirement is to have backed up plan in terms of space requirement. The challenges with such backup plan is short term. So it is not a straightforward, easy solution to find somebody who are willing to give you a very short term solution. But yet, I guess from a Lazada perspective, over the many years of operation in e-commerce logistics, we have built out a certain relationship, a certain network that actually avail ourselves and helping us to actually do this proper. But prior to that, there's quite a fair bit of planning involved in terms of qualifying all the projection coming from a cross-border requirement, local fulfillment requirement, the retail segment of our business, that amalgamate into a number that help us to have a sensing that we need to trigger that kind of additional capacity to handle the campaign season. Most of the time, the answer is yes. So, but the number is about how accurate it is, so that our partner feel the reliability that they can work with us over a long term. How they do it at the back end in terms of buffering their own trough and valley, well, I not necessarily need to know so. That's why we outsource as well. So that is the best way I can respond to your question. There's no perfect way to do it, but this is one of the way we are doing it.
Okay. All right. Let's maybe take another question here. This is from, let me bring this for Indonesia. So Nehemia from Indonesia is asking, can you share to us related to Indonesia scope active Lazada? Maybe give us, she's probably asking, give us a status of Lazada in Indonesia when it comes to cross-border maybe. So have you upgrading? Are you making some changes on the way you operate in Indonesia?
Oh, well, earlier I mentioned Indonesia remains to be a closed country with regard to allowing more imports of merchandise coming into the country for sales. So that remains the same today. So even as much as we want to enter as a cross-border into Indonesia, we can't, not unless we flout the rules, which we are not going to do so. So cross-border opportunity with Indonesia remains to be very constrained. So instead of that, I think the focus for Lazada Logistics in Indonesia is to support the local requirement. Bearing in mind, Indonesia is the biggest country in Southeast Asia. They have a lot of homegrown manufacturing facilities, production. There's no limit to how we can actually work with the local manufacturer to place a product on a platform. So the focus for Indonesia is very much domestic. So that put us right in line of competition with the local boys. So in that aspect, although there's a protection for the local, but yet you still have Lazada and the other competitor operating in inside Indonesia, going heads on with the domestic marketplace too. So you can't have the cake and eat it all. I guess there will be always competition.
Okay, Indonesia, big market, but tough to crack, right? So
very tough.
Well, let's see. Thank you very much, Samuel, for being with us again and spending the time today at this event. Okay.
Sorry, Max, I could not hear you.
I say thanks again for being with us today. Okay, we look forward to see you next time.
All right, thanks a lot, Max, and thank you, everybody. Goodbye.
Thank you. All right, so next speaker is on standby, ready to go. Don't go anywhere. Stay with us. We have another session coming up.